Welcome back to Maintainer's Garage. I'm Bags. Before we get into today's video, I'm just going to say, this coronavirus stuff, just do your best to stay safe out there, folks. That's all I got to say about that. I barely know what I'm doing on cars. I definitely don't know what to do about all this. So just stay safe out there. Do your best. So in today's video, we're going to be installing steel braided brake lines. Why would you want to install steel braided brake lines? And we're going to be replacing this rubber line. That rubber line, if you do track days, HPD type stuff, when you do a lot of repetitive hard braking, the rubber line can swell a little bit and it can even bubble. It'll still work, but what that does is as you apply the brakes, you don't get a consistent pedal. It varies a little bit and you want more consistency, and that's what this will give you. One thing I will say on these is just make sure, probably can't see it, this says DOT rated. These are from Stop Tech. They are DOT approved. Whatever company you pick, just make sure they're DOT rated. That'll help ensure that you're getting a good quality product. Stop Tech's been around a while. I'm not saying they're better or worse than anybody else. All I'm saying is I've used them on a previous Corvette. I like them. I like the way they're made. They hold up pretty good. Once you change from the rubber to the steel braided line, you need to inspect these more. With this coating, what can happen is rocks and things can chip it, and then that corrosion can start getting in here and weakening this. I'm not telling hit it with a microscope. Just rub your hand along it, look at it, make sure there's no big hunks missing. Rocks, things, all that stuff can damage all this. Just my 2 cents. Now onto the fluid. I'm also going to be flushing the system because we're going to take this line apart. Fluid's going to drain out. I've got Redline RL600. I've never tried this before. I've used various stuff. I decided to try this. It was on sale from Summit. Did a little bit of research on it. People seem to be having good results with it. Flying Miata specifically. If you don't know who they are, they're a Miata shop and they do all kinds of things with Miatas. Make them really fast, and they beat the snot out of them all over the world. Tracks and everything. So if they recommend it, I think it's going to be a decent fluid. And I understand a 3,300 pound Corvette isn't the same as a much lighter Miata, but again, they put Corvette engines in them, they supercharge them, they turbocharge them, they beat the snot out of them on a track. So if the fluid holds up for them, I'm going to give it a whirl. And again, it's not like I replaced it with, the dollar store special brake fluid. In my opinion, the best brake fluid out there is Castrol SRF React, but I've used it before. There's a little bit of a shortage right now, and plus I'm not paying $70 a quart for brake fluid. And I'm not joking, that's what it costs. All right, so now onto this. We're going to do the rear first, and I'm only going to show you, the driver's side, passenger side, same, plus I can't get the camera over there. So this rubber line right here goes from the back of our brake caliper to this fitting, and that's where it connects to steel lines. The one thing I will say is when you do this, make sure you understand the orientation of that. On mine, it is, this angle is like that. So it goes towards the center of the car, and I'm going to disconnect this inside flange first. That steel line comes in and threads in. You've got to make sure you get this bracket. It's got a little clip on it. And then I'll connect it here, and then I'm going to do my best to keep this angle as much as possible. All right, so now I'm going to top off the brake fluid, and what I mean by top off is I'm going to fill it beyond the max mark. Why? When I disconnect this inner portion, this inner line, it's going to start leaking. It's going to leak at about a drop a minute, but I'm going to fill it up just above the max level. No one's going to hit the brake pedal, so there will be no force applied. It's not going to bleed out in the time it's going to take me to replace this line. Then I'm going to do the other side, then I'll do the front left, and then the front right. And I'm going to bleed the brakes, but I'm going to bleed them differently. But we'll get into that when I get closer. Anyway, so let me just top off this, and then we'll dig into that. This is our line. The fitting on the back of the brake caliper is 13 millimeter bolt. On this bracket here, on the back side of that bracket, is a 13 millimeter flare nut on this steel line. There's a 10 millimeter bolt on this bracket. Do not remove that bolt until you get that flare nut line totally removed. Then you can take that bolt off, then you can separate that bracket. There is a clip that comes down from the top to hold the factory one in, and you want to reuse it on the new brake line. And then you can reassemble all that and then connect it here. And just trying to get you a good zoomed in picture before we start. I'm using a 13 millimeter crow's foot flare nut for that. That's going to make this job much easier. You can do it without it. You can do it with a standard 13 millimeter. But believe me, this is going to make getting in here and getting on all this much easier. I've tried to zoom in as best I can. There's just no good angle for this. And I've got a little stubby wrench that I'm going to be able to get in here and get a little better, more throw on. Brake fluid is corrosive to paint, and you may not want to get it on you. I find gloves in this works well until you have to get all this stuff back together. So I'm just not going to wear anything. And in these days and times, wash my freaking hands. Right on. All right, that's off. We'll get our 10 millimeter nut here. Lefty-loosey, nope, lefty-loosey. And hopefully our catch can is in the right place. And the caliper is full of fluid, the line is full of fluid. Once you disconnect that, that's going to drain out a whole bunch more fluid a lot faster than that, but it'll stop. See that? That's just going to drip. That's why I topped off the master cylinder. It's not going to just flow out of there at a super high rate and dump it and put a whole bunch of air in the system. So that's our flange that holds our brake line to this bracket. We just got to pry that off. Now I'm going to just flick this down and move my little bucket here. Just spray a little bit of brake cleaner on this. This bracket goes in like that. You want to put your bracket, your new line on like that. This flange goes just like that. And you may have to tap it down. The back of this nut is probably going to spin because this has an oval shape for that brake fitting. So when it fits in there, it doesn't spin. So you're going to have to put a 17 millimeter wrench on the back of this when it comes down to tightening. Hopefully that helps. So you're going to want to pull the flange forward and thread it into this and get it most of the way before you ever do anything else. I'm going to thread this as much as I possibly can by hand to ensure it's not cross-threaded. All right. Now I'm going to put our 10 millimeter nut back down, not all the way, but just in. This is an aluminum casting. Make sure you get that not cross-threaded either. Take this 13 millimeter bolt off the back of the caliper. That was a little tight. And there's that fluid coming out of the caliper. But as soon as it's done, it's done. As you can see, this is what I was talking about, the angle of that. That was important to make sure you get right. And now we can put our new brake line on with our new bolt and crush washers. On there, one on the outside, one on the inside. Take a clean rag, clean blue towel, what have you, and just wipe down that caliper mounting surface. Get all the gunk off of it. And again, just come in here and make sure you get this run by hand first before you ever put a tool on it. You cross thread this, misery is going to be your new name. You take this old line and you can just kind of see, because it's still going to have the curve to it, and you want to make sure your new line doesn't block your fitting for your brake bleeding, and you want to make sure it's got a good flat mounting surface and everything. And now you're going to want to hold this line in place as you tighten down that 12 millimeter fastener. It does not need to be gorilla torqued. Snug. You're crushing those bronze washers to give you a nice, good, leak-proof seal. I need to put that 10 millimeter all the way down now. And there is a little leg that fits right there. That 10 millimeter fastener is going into aluminum. Don't kill it. All right, so we got a 17 millimeter and our 13 millimeter flare nut, our 13 millimeter wrench for our flare nut. Snug that down. You're not trying to kill this thing. It doesn't owe you money. You're just trying to get it good and snug. And you come in with a can of brake cleaner and blast the snot out of everything. You're gonna want this all good and clean and dry before you start trying to bleed the brakes and pressure check and leak check everything. So that's why blast the snot out of it, let it dry, go work on the front. Okay, on the front we have the same situation. We've got this is our brake line here. That's our bracket back there. It's got a 13 millimeter flare nut, another 10 millimeter nut holding that bracket down, 13 millimeter nut holding the brake line to the caliper. We'll take that flare nut off again, all the way off, take that 10 millimeter bolt out, disassemble that bracket, reassemble it with the new brake line, just like we did back there on the back and the driver, our passenger side, just like this on the driver's side. And as I look, yep, we're still got plenty of fluid in there. Got our drip pan in place. All right, we're gonna take this off. Yeah, these little crow's foot flare nut wrenches make jobs like this really easy. All right, now that's plenty loose. Grab my little 13 millimeter stubby, finish it off. Get it all the way backed off. All right, and done. Now we can take that 10 millimeter bolt out, holding that bracket down. Grab this. We're gonna have to separate that same little flange. Just pry up on it and get it to separate. And that comes off. And then that separates from that. Spray a little brake cleaner on it, get this all cleaned up. And our flange goes just like that. And you can see again, that's curved. This, it won't hold it, so that's why we have to put that 17 millimeter wrench on it, on the back of it. And tap that down. All right, that's fully seated. And same thing, we'll take this, thread it into this as much as we physically can by hand before we ever hit it with a wrench. All right, we got that together. We're just going to make sure it's nice and snug. This is going into this aluminum cradle. Make sure it's fully started by hand before you strip it. Make sure it's fully started by hand before you put a socket on it, and don't strip it. And then I'll tighten those down. Tighten that 10 millimeter down. And again, this is aluminum. Don't go crazy. All right, so now we have a 17 millimeter and a 13 millimeter. 17 for the back of the for the steel braided line, and a 13 for the flare nut. Yeah, that seems tight. All right, make sure that 10 millimeter is good and tight. It is. Now we'll take that 13 millimeter off the back of the brake caliper and move our little bucket, because when we get it off, the brake caliper itself is going to drain. Get our new 12 millimeter bolt and 2 crush washers. And just like on that one, it's got the same curvature. Put 1 crush washer on one side, 1 crush washer on the other side. Take a rag, wipe that mating surface down, and hand thread that fastener. All right, and we'll tighten that 13 millimeter down. All right, now that 13 millimeter is tightened down, make sure everything's good and happy. That's good. Now we got to blast all this with brake cleaner, wipe it down. That way when we do a good brake bleed and leak check, we'll know if it's leaking or not. Okay, we've got our brake lines installed, all cleaned up, no fluid anywhere. It's 100% dry. What I'm going to do is I've got my motive power bleeder, I always use air, Bill, Dan knows. I always use air to bleed the brakes anyway. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cap off the brake master cylinder. I'm going to pump it up to about 15 psi on the gauge here on the power bleeder. I'm going to let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. That way it'll have pressure on it, and if there's any leaks, I'll be able to look at it. I'm not going to crack the bleeder lines at the calipers yet. I'm just going to let it sit on there, like I said, about 10 to 15 minutes to see if there's any leaks. That way I can feel good, and if there are, try to tighten it up and stop it, clean it up, all that. So that's what we're going to do now. I love this Motive power bleeder. I got this thing years ago, and it is absolutely just easy to use, works, and always makes bleeding brakes, A, one-man job, B, much faster. Now we're at 15. The first thing we can do is just kind of watch our pressure needle. It's going to bleed down really, really slow anyway, but you can just watch it. If it bleeds down really quickly, then you know you got a leak. All right, it's been just over 15 minutes. I kept having to pump this up. It would bleed down at a slow rate, but I kept it between 10 and 15 psi an entire 15 minutes. Not one drop anywhere I can see. So now I'm going to top off the master cylinder, and it is topped off, and pump this back up to 15 psi. Then you're going to start at your back wheel first. You're going to do you're going to start at the passenger back wheel. Then you're going to do the driver back wheel. Then you're going to do the front passenger wheel. Then you're going to do the driver front wheel. Why do you do that? You're going to the furthest wheel first to bleed that entire line. It's a big long line. It may have some air in it now, and it has the most fluid. I'm trying to flush all the old fluid out. That's why I've got this container. I'm going to hook up this rubber hose to it, and 10 millimeter wrench will crack that bleeder valve, pump fluid out of here into here. As it fills up, I'm going to check this master cylinder. When it gets low, I will tighten the screw, come back here, bleed the pressure off first, take this cap off, refill it to the full mark, and then keep going until I get beautiful clear fluid inside of this. My garage isn't set up for me to show you the passenger side. That is where I'm going to start first. You're only going to see the driver's side, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. But again, just start passenger rear, passenger front, driver front. All right. Okay, we got the right rear done, passenger rear. We're now moving to the left rear, driver rear, and you'll get to see that. I've topped off the brake master cylinder. I've got the cap to this snug, and now I'm going to pump it up to 15 psi. All right, we got our 15 psi, and again, the reason I like to use air in this instead of, some people put brake fluid in here and pump it directly into there, so you don't have to take the cap off and top it off. What happens is if any one of these fittings leak fluid, then you just have a giant mess. That's why I use air, just saying. All right, that's done. Let's go to the back. All right, now on the driver rear, not a good angle for the camera, but directly in line right here on the back side of the rotor is the bleeder valve. It is a 10 millimeter. Just grab it, lefty-loosey. I like to use clear containers so that way when I watch the brake fluid fill up, A, I can actually see it filling up. B, I can see what color it is, and you just take this tube off, connect it right to this bleeder, lefty-loosey. And you don't have to turn this thing more than about half of a turn, and that's it. And I'm hoping I've got that in frame, and as it goes down, you just need to check the master cylinder, make sure it does not get below the min mark. When it gets to the point where I'm low on, I get close to the minimum mark on the master cylinder, I will tighten this valve, bleed all the pressure at the pressure bleeder cap. You just unscrew the cap very slowly, the pressure will bleed off, then it's safe to take the brake master cylinder cap off and add more fluid. All right, we're getting close to our minimum mark, so we'll just righty-tighty this again, go up there, and I'll show you when I'm on the front when I can get all this in one frame. You just spin the cap, loosen the cap real slow, the pressure will bleed off, there's no danger. And maybe you can hear it. Just like that. And then it's safe to remove the cap from the master cylinder and top it off again. Then you pump it back up to 15 psi, and the next time I fill it up, it should be much better. Just about half a turn is all you really need on that bleeder screw. But just don't forget to keep coming to check the master cylinder. I mean, I know I just cracked it, but check it, because the worst thing you could do is let that get low and put yourself in a situation where you pump air into the system. All right, we're getting close to that minimum mark. So we'll righty-tighty this, and don't tighten this till it, absolutely screams. Just snug. Then you can pull your bleeder hose off. I don't know if this is coming out on camera or not, but that fluid is much better looking than the other fluid. What I like to do also when I'm done here is just spray this down with brake cleaner and then actually wipe it down. After I get all the brakes done, I start the car and I pump the brake pedal, give it a little gas, create some vacuum to build up some booster pressure again, and then I hit the brake pedal a whole bunch. And I come back again and look for leaks just because there's more pressure using the brake pedal. Again, just your brakes are important. You don't want to A, have a leak, and B, not have any brakes. All right, now we can go up to the front. All right, I haven't bled the pressure off from the rear brake yet and topped it off. I just wanted to show you, you just spin this thing a little easily and it'll start to bleed pressure off, and then it's off. After you bleed the pressure off that, then you remove the cap to the brake master cylinder. Then you add fluid. All right, we got the front passenger wheel done. Now we're going to do the front driver wheel, last one. Got our master cylinder topped off. Got this sealed up, pumped up to 15 psi. This line is the bleeder screw, and it points straight up. That's why this wood stacked up, is when you connect to it, this one, you need to have your bottle a little higher. So we're ready to go. We got it balanced out. Just lefty-loosey, half a turn, and it'll be okay. And I'm holding the top of my hose. It's got a little too much bend in it, so if I don't hold it, it'll fall off. But it's filling up. And I'll go ahead and say this now. If you're looking at me to tell you, hey, you only have to buy 3 bottles of brake fluid because it's going to take 27 ounces or whatever, I don't know how much it's going to take. Every car is different. How often do you flush your brakes and all that? I do mine, depending on how many track weekends I do, at least once a year. Sometimes I do it twice a year. Brake fluid doesn't go bad, just don't open it. So I bought 4 bottles. I'm on bottle number 3 now, and I've just gotten into it. Once I am done, I'm going to put that bottle in a Ziploc bag and I'm going to put a date on it. 6 months from now, I'm throwing that bottle out. I keep brake fluid, open brake fluid, for 6 months. Moisture gets into brake fluid. That's why there's a dry boiling point and a wet boiling point, and that's what that's about. Moisture will get into it. Maybe I can keep it longer than 6 months. I don't. That's just my thing. Am I better or worse than anybody else? No. That's just how I do it. Am I willing to throw that $17 in the trash? Absolutely. And by trash, I mean recycle it. Don't be a jerk. And you want to keep making sure you're watching the master cylinder. This one's a little easier, and especially for me because everything's in one frame. You don't have to go through as much fluid on the front. The master cylinder is right there. The line is much shorter, so you're going to use more fluid flushing out the rears than the fronts. This hose won't hold itself up, so I've got to pull it off, and when you pull it off, you're going to spill brake fluid. Just grab this, turn slowly, and it'll bleed the pressure off. Then you can top your master cylinder off again, put our cap back on, tighten this back up, and pressurize 15 psi. Oh yeah, that's A-okay down there. I don't know if it's easy to see that or not. On the camera, you never know how this comes out. That fluid, brand new. All right, now we're done with bleeding. We just got to properly clean up. And you want to make sure you get all that brake fluid residue off of here. How else will you know if it's leaking or not if you don't clean it properly? And then look, crack our top of our bleeder canister, pop this off. We're done with that. We'll top off our fluid reservoir. Sometimes on these plastic fluid containers like the master cylinder, the stain will make it hard to see where the actual fluid level is. I shake it. I'm old too, so my vision's not as good as it used to be. I don't care. We've got a topped off master cylinder. I'm gonna walk around the car, make sure all these are dry. Then I'm gonna start the car and check that way. We'll just bump the throttle, build up some vacuum, and now I'm gonna press and hold the brakes for about 5 seconds, let go, bump the throttle a couple more times, build up more vacuum for the brake booster, press and hold the brake again for about 5 seconds. We'll walk around and look for leaks again. This may seem excessive to some of you. Fair enough. Just how I do it. That's how I installed steel braided brake lines, bled my brakes. We got a happy brake system. We're good to go. Thanks for watching Maintainer's Garage. Have a great day.